Welcome to the Mountain Bike Coaching Podcast, Donuts and Bikes. I'm Christian.
And I'm Paul.
And we're here to discuss the techniques and skills we use to progress our coaches, our riders, and ourselves to be more confident, competent, unlock performance, and have more fun on our mountain bikes.
Halloween was last night. What did you guys do anything for Halloween?
We did. We had our first state playoff game for the boys' high school soccer team.
Oh, sick.
So we've been trick-or-treating with them, since the get-go, and first time that we hadn't trick-or-treated. We had a classic Boone foggy, damp night under the lights with soccer. It was so foggy it was hard to even see the other sideline.
Nice.
So,
whoa,
yeah,
that's crazy. Did they win?
They did. Pulled out a victory onto the second round of the state playoffs. That's been exciting.
That's cool. Yeah, I didn't dress up last night. It was the first Halloween in years where I didn't dress up, and it was amazing because I was actually warm because I wasn't wearing some stupid costume walking around Whistler on October 31st at night. I was like, this is the best Halloween ever. But I did feel a bit bad that I didn't dress up.
Did the kids dress up?
Yeah. Huxley was a little sumo wrestler.
I could see that. Yeah.
Thank you. And then Summer was, what was Summer? Oh, Luna Lovegood from Harry Potter. She killed it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, hey, let's crack on into this episode.
We should. Yeah. So, yeah. Podcast. What are we doing? Mountain bike coaching podcast. So this is early days for our listeners. So basically, if you're interested, check out our info podcast where we just tell you a little bit about who we are, what we do, our background, our history in mountain bike coaching, and our kind of our approach to riding and coaching and training instructors. So if you haven't already, check out that episode. But for now, my name's Paul, and I've been teaching mountain biking for over 20 years and training instructors as well through the Professional Mountain Bike Instructor Association, and I'm head coach for Z Mountain Bike Camps in Whistler. It's a little coaching company I run in Whistler, and I love mountain biking. I love teaching mountain biking, and this podcast came about with just chatting to Christian and having a passion for wanting to share more thoughts and ideas that might help riders ride better and might help coaches teach better. And really, it's just, I think similar for you, Christian, it's just kind of born out of a passion for wanting to do more and wanting to share more and hopefully wanting to help riders, help the sport more. And so, yeah, I just wanted to touch on that a little bit because these are early episodes, but like I said to the listeners, check out that info episode for all the details. Christian, anything you want to kind of jump in, add on that bit there before we jump on with today's topic?
Yeah, for sure. I think that, for me as a coach and a rider instructor, the more that I put into it, of sharing the love, the passion for mountain biking, the more it comes back, just to see how many people really connect with this idea of riding and progressing and being out on the trails, making really good things happen for ourselves, really has a lot of benefits. I'm just really stoked to bring this podcast to the listeners. Awesome.
Yeah, definitely a passion project. And I feel like I said, it's early days, but we'll see how the first few episodes go. And if everyone loves it, we'll do loads more, I think. We've got lots of good ideas. So kind of fly by wire, and we'll just sort of figure it out as we go. But what's the topic for this episode for today? I know you've got something planned for us.
Today's topic is a discussion of the saying, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And we're going to be looking at this from the perspective of a coach working with riders, as well as riders working on our own skills, and really trying to unpack the different dimensions of this saying to try to see in the end how slowing down actually can be very beneficial to our progression. And then looking at some of the keys to going faster.
Nice. That sounds sweet. Let's jump in.
All right, let's go for it. All right, so today's podcast episode topic is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. I was thinking about this as a subtitle, progression the right way. And I came upon this this saying from some of the fast guys at Cane Creek in Asheville, just as a saying, getting ready for races or wanting to go fast. And it was kind of puzzling as a saying. I was like, what does this really mean? Slowing down to be smooth as a means to going faster. And it kind of led me down a deep hole of just thinking about this in general. And I thought that there's probably some literal meanings to it and then some figurative meanings to it, and a little bit of research and doctors and folks. Seems like this really first came from the military. And I asked one of my buddies who's in the special forces, like if this is something he encountered in their A team. He's like, yeah, we've talked about that, but really like slow is slow and smooth is smooth. Like, we do our thing, and kind of talking a little bit more about it. The whole idea from the military perspective is if you rush into a task that might take 1 second, you might get it done, but the outcomes might be uncertain. Versus if you take like 1.5 seconds, slow down, you absolutely maximize your certainty of the outcomes. Right. And so, so thinking about this from a mountain bike perspective, I immediately go to racing, thinking about preparing for racing. Paul, have you've raced before? What are your thoughts on this? And just from a racing perspective of slow is smooth and smooth is fast?
Well, I think it's such a neat idea because there's so many different ways you can look at it. But the one thing I always think of with racing is if you flip it around, and just maybe start with fast is fast. Well, I think one of the most common things I've experienced racing, and I know the athletes I work with or just other racers, is a lot of the time when someone actually tries to go fast, that's when they make mistakes and they crash. So the art of racing is learning how to go fast without necessarily trying to go fast. Because if you think about it, I always think about it from like a percentage point of view to try and quantify things. But let's say your max speed is obviously 100%. If you're riding at 100%, your bandwidth, your margin of error is obviously tiny. You're riding at your maximum effort, your maximum skill level, because you're trying to ride at your maximum speed, 100%. And so the margin of error there is tiny, which means, if you think of a mountain bike trail and a good race run, there's so many decisions you're making. There's so many movements that you have to execute. And with those two things considered, that means there's constant situations or endless situations in a race and where you can make a mistake. You can do it too much, too little, too slow, too fast, too hard, too soft, too far on the left, too far on the right. And so for sure, you might be trying to go fast, your max effort, max speed, but now you're greatly increasing the chances of making mistakes. And then from there, like being able to recover from those mistakes. So yeah, if you kind of interview 50 riders when they come across that finish line and say, did you have the race run you wanted? Maybe 40, 49, 48 of those riders are probably going to say, no, I made a mistake. On the other hand, you might take that one rider or two riders or that kind of minority, maybe 5 riders, and they said, yeah, that race run was smooth, I made no mistakes. And then you might ask them, well, did you go fast enough? Oh, probably not. No. So I think that's where this smooth is, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. It just brings up that conversation with going fast doesn't necessarily mean riding at 100% speed or 100% effort, because then you make too many mistakes and the overall outcome is you're going to be slower. But at the same time, if you're going slow enough to be smooth the whole way down, you're probably also not going as fast as you could be. So it's that's why racing is so awesome, because finding that balance is so hard. You push yourself too much, you crash. You push yourself too much, you make mistakes, you go slow. You don't push yourself enough, well, you could have gone faster. So I think that's why people are attracted to racing, because it's that sort of holy grail of trying to find that balance, which is so difficult to find.
Yeah, for sure. I like that idea of bandwidth, not running at 100%, but dialing back to somewhere where you've got that threshold of performance and awareness, right? Like, have you worked with any athletes on like honing in on that bandwidth, and how can you stay focused within that bracket?
Yeah, like something I've done in the past is you'll take a section of trail with your athlete and or rider, and you'll time it, and it's a trail they know fairly well, and basically it's a fairly classic exercise, but you'll get them to try and ride it at race speed, as fast as they safely feel they can ride it. And then you kind of just go down from there. So sort of you could kind of quantify race speed as like 90 to 100% speed. And then second lap, ride it at 80%, and then third lap, 70%, and so on. And then maybe do a lap where you're trying to ride 90, 100%, but you're not allowed to pedal, for example. And basically you come up with a bunch of times. And more often than not, it highlights that the 90 to 100%, i.e. their, quote unquote, their race speed. Sometimes it's not the fastest time. Quite a lot of the time, it's not the fastest time. And if it is the fastest time, it's not by very much. Like it's a 1 or a 2 second difference. And so that exercise is a really good way to highlight to a rider, junior racer, athlete, like, at what point does their effort actually make them ride slower? So at what point are they trying to ride fast, but they're actually riding slower? And then at what point are they actually holding things back, not trying to ride fast, but they are actually riding faster, or at least a similar speed? So that helps just put some numbers to the concept, basically. And every time I do that, I'm always alarmed at just how much that shows to you, the coach, kind of timing them, but be also the rider. They always feel like the 90 to 100%. They always feel like that race speed is going to be so much faster, and often it's not.
Do you have any memorable race experiences where you've slowed down too much or gone too fast?
Yes, absolutely. Like, I remember one year on the Fat Wednesdays, it was a Schleer race, and I think it was Schleer to Lower Whistler downhill. I can't remember. And it was super smooth. I knew I rode it really well. It just felt, it was one of those races where you finish and you're like, wow, like, I'm amazing. Like, that was awesome. Like, I felt awesome. But then in reflection, like within like a minute of crossing the finish line, you start reflecting and you're like, well, hang on a minute. Why did that feel so smooth and easy? Like, it felt so easy. And then I was like, oh yeah, I didn't pedal there, and I braked pretty early there. And all of a sudden you start realizing that it felt great, but it probably wasn't that fast. And for sure, that time was really disappointing. I remember it being like slower than the year before. I think I was like 2 seconds slower. So that one always sticks out to me, because racing that trail is quite tricky. in Worcester. It's definitely one of those tracks that's like a bike park track, and then you try and race it, and it's kind of awkward to try and race it. And then there's other ones too. Like I remember I usually race in Crankworx every year, just in the old man's class, in that ATH. And there was a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, the Crankworx before this past summer, and I got a really good result. I think I was 7th in Masters, and it was like one of the best races I've ever had. And that was the rare occasion where, like, you tried hard. You were like at your 90 to 100% max. Like you crossed the finish line, and you're like, I couldn't have done anything better. I couldn't have tried harder. And I got a good result. I wanted to beat Nigel Page, but he pit me by like 1.5 seconds or something. So it was quite competitive in the old man's class. But that was I remember that sort of sticks out in my mind, because it was so rare that I remember thinking, like, I tried to go fast, and I think I went fast, and I didn't make many mistakes. Like I remember thinking, like, wow, I think that's like 1 of 3 times that's ever happened, where the stars align, kind of thing. But
cool. I think that for me, as a rider, as a coach, there's another sense of this saying, and I think if you could substitute the word fast for effective.
Yeah.
And thinking about not just a race speed, and that kind of opens this concept up to like all of our riding, and all the coaching that we might want to do. And I think that a lot can be said for practicing, and when you start looking into some of the business concepts of this saying, looking at the accuracy of what you're practicing, slowing down to pay attention to the little details, and then that's going to create efficiency or effectiveness. And I think I see that in our coaching as well. So I'm wondering, just kind of flip this around and think about this as the end goal not being fast, but being an effective mountain biker, or progressing to that next level. How do you see that unfolding in coaching?
Good question. Like, I think anytime you're in a situation where you have more time to make decisions, you're going to have better outcomes. So whether it's like riding your bike, that's where I think the slow is smooth comes from, because if you're slower, you have more time to collect information and make decisions. You're probably going to make better decisions. You're going to end up riding smoother, not smashing through those rocks or not breaking too late into the turn or whatever. And it's similar for coaching. Like if you're, that's partly why I like long-term programs, because in a long-term coaching program, you're with that rider so much more often, whether it's 1 week for, a session once a week for the whole summer, or whether it's like 5 sessions over a month, you've got that time. And so you've got the ability to collect more information, because so much of coaching is not necessarily telling, it's just watching, it's listening, it's seeing and what the rider is doing in front of you, and talking to the rider. And the more time you have to collect information, the more time you have to come up with a plan and make decisions in your coaching. And so the outcome is going to be similar. It's going to be a smoother outcome. Your rider might develop sooner. They might have that aha moment quicker. They might get through, like coaching riders, you often have peaks and valleys. They might get through that valley, that breakdown phase quicker, because you have more of a sense of how to get your rider out of that valley and up to the peak sooner. So I think slow is smooth is kind of we talk about that in riding context, but really it's a concept that can apply in anything, really, any walk of life, really. I think. I don't know, what do you think? What's your thoughts with that, with coaching?
To me, it's about progression and really thinking through what practice are we really doing? Like we talk about, we need to practice a certain technique or a certain skill or whatever, but what is it that is going to actually progress this thing that we're practicing. The practice makes perfect adage isn't quite accurate. It's like it's perfect practice. What is it that we're actually practicing? And for me as a coach, it really comes back to skills. What skill are we focusing in on, and how are we paying attention to that skill? Because I think there's a sense with this that we can rush through things because we're interested in getting to a goal or getting further down the trail or whatever it is, and miss some of the steps along the way.
And I think that's where that timeline comes in. If you have more time, you don't have that external pressure to achieve A or B or C. You've got longer to figure out what skills specifically need addressing, and what drills or techniques or biomechanics are going to help develop those skills, those outcomes. So it's, I like that. I like that idea of just more time to identify what the riders need, so we could make things happen, make things change.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Hope you're enjoying the podcast. If you want to learn more about us, please check out our first episode, which digs into who we are, what we do, and our background in coaching and mountain bike industry. You can also check us out on Instagram @donutsandbikes, or at our podcast, the Mountain Bike Coaching Podcast.buzzsprout.com. And now back to the show. Yeah, cool. Well, on that note, let's talk for a minute about skills versus techniques, and all the things that are related with techniques. So, like, what's a skill in relation to mountain biking?
Good question. We could talk about this for like the whole day. I do all the time. It's literally what I do. I mean, anytime we use a label, like if you look at coaching, like basically we're using a language, and good coaching has consistent language, but it also has definitions within that language. So it doesn't really matter what you call things as long as you define the labels. So for us in our coaching world, in the PMBI Association and the sort of the certifications you and I work through, like a skill is basically a fundamental component of riding a bike. So in our system in PMBIA, we have the 6 fundamental skills: so position and balance, operation controls, terrain awareness, direction control, pressure control, and then timing and coordination. So in that sense, the skill is, if you're riding a bike and you're, whether it's just down to the pub or climbing up a tech trail, if you're riding a bike, you are incorporating one of those 6 skills. Mountain biking is those 6 skills constantly working together. It's basically our way of just saying, hey, here's a sport. It's got a bunch of techniques. It's got a bunch of movements. How can we take all of that information and make it easier to understand and therefore easier to teach? And it's kind of like a scientific approach. Anytime you have a big subject matter, you're studying the life cycle of the earthworm or something. You break it into categories so that you can isolate each category and study those things independently. It just makes something big, break it down into bite-sized chunks so you can study it. So for us, a skill is really it's a fundamental component of riding a bike. And how would you differentiate that from a technique? Well, for us, a technique is something you would employ to perform a skill. So to give you an example, like position and balance, that's our bedrock, that's our foundational skill. And a technique we might employ is standing up and being fairly centered on the bike when we ride downhill. That's that's the technique of body position on the bike to achieve this skill of position and balance, feeling stable, feeling mobile on the bike.
Yeah, for sure. And looking at that from a coaching point of view, working with your rider, breaking it down to that level then allows that rider to experience the performance growth, right? Because things are measurable. And it allows us as the coach then to have reference points of performance. So for our assessment, continued development, knowing how to push these riders. And I think that's, for me, where the slow smooth really comes down to, is like slowing down and looking at the individual pieces, and then using those pieces then to build whatever progression that we're interested in, flowing more smoothly down a tech trail or jumping or whatever, because it is complicated and overwhelming.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. No, I like that idea of like, how do you apply the catchphrase slow is smooth to coaching in this sense, and that's a really nice way of sort of linking that catchphrase to coaching. That's exactly what we do in coaching. We slow the riding down, technically speaking, to watch something, isolate something, and pull that little piece out, and then develop it on its own, and then we plug it back in and we see if they're smoother when they start riding, right? And I like that the way you link that.
Yeah, totally. I coaching an individual recently that wanted to learn jumping, and he had these ideas of what that was going to look like, and we focused in on being centered.
Yeah.
And we're going to ride these trails with lots of berms. We're going to be centered, like focusing in on this one thing, slowing the speeds down, and you can see the light bulbs going, firing off.
Yeah.
This slowing it down, and then in the end, throughout the afternoon, then we're building this progression of jumping, but by slowing down and focusing in on one thing, being smooth by being centered.
Yeah, I like that. And that makes me think of like slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And it's more like slow is smooth, and you need to be smooth if you want to be fast.
There you go.
The smooth isn't necessarily fast, but if you want to be fast, and you want to be fast a lot of the time, you need to first learn to be smooth, because anyone can go fast, right? Like, I can try and follow you down one of your local trails, and you're gonna pull away from me. I can't just be like, okay, I'm going to ride faster and keep up with Christian, because knowing you and how you ride on your local trails, like, I'm probably going to die if I do that. Like, it's going to get sketchy, right? But what I can do is, well, let's just ride the trail smooth first, get some mileage on that, get to know the trail, get to learn the trail, and then I can gradually increase my speed. And then when I do go fast, I'm safely going faster, because I've figured out the smoothness on that trail first. And it's the same for techniques. Like, if you want to, you've got a jump trail at home and you want to ride that jump trail fast, you could just go faster, but you're probably going to overshoot the landings, get crumpled on the takeoffs. You can't just go fast. You've got to learn to ride that jump trail smoother, and then gradually increase the speed. And then actually, if you increase the speed, say you're doing a 5 out of 10, and then you try the trail a 6 out of 10 for speed, now you're probably going to lose that smoothness. So you need to kind of stay at 6 out of 10 and get the smoothness back before you bump it up to 7 out of 10. So I think that's where, it reminds me, as I'm going through it, like a buddy of mine, Mr. John Shelley, infamous around these parts. He's an ex. I got to get this right, or he'll have a go at me. But he used to race World Cup snowboards, like parallel, giant slalom, and border cross. I'm not sure if he used to race border cross, actually. But anyway, he's coached border cross, the Olympic level for years, and a phenomenal athlete. And he always says, like, you have to train at race speed, because when you go racing, you're used to being at that speed. And if you want to get good at racing and winning races, you have to train at that speed to some extent, because then when you're at the race, it's nothing really different. And what that allows you to do is be smooth and be consistent. So anyone can go down that trail and be fast, but can you do it fast for 8 laps and not crash? Because that's how you're going to start winning races. So what he's basically doing there is he's training his athletes, his border cross riders. Like, I've been out with him on a very rare occasion in Whistler here in the winter, and holy cow, like, you get off the chairlift and it's like, hold on, like, your pants are going to fall off, like, this shit's about to get real. and you're just flying on the snowboard trying to keep up with these guys, and they're half asleep. They're just like, whatever, like, I'll do a 180 here and a 360 there, ollie over this, and I'm just holding on because I'm not used to riding that fast on my snowboard. But for them, that's just how fast they ride. And so they've been able to increase the speed through practice and mileage, and to the point where now they're riding so fast, but it's also really smooth.
Yeah, it seems like there is a bit of a mental component to speed that you're speaking of there. Like there's the technique and the actual skill to go fast.
Yeah.
But then to adjust your mind to what those speeds are actually like, and to train that experience.
Train the brain.
Yeah, train the brain. You think about some of the World Cup downhillers that ride motos. And that being able to go that much faster and getting mentally used to that. I think there's a lot, obviously, with the mental side of coaching here. And the other thing that I think about with the slow is smooth is fast saying here is the idea of rushing.
Yeah,
because the opposite of this is rushing. We're rushing into something.
I like that.
Yeah, I mean, in human nature, the way our brain works, like we constantly are making shortcuts, because there's things we don't need to remember, and habits that we can kind of jump over. And I translate that to riding. Like when I find myself rushing down a trail, I'm missing things. Like I'm missing individual pieces of the trail, and then sometimes that will catch me off guard and like shock me back to the moment. Right. Have you had any experiences like that?
Totally. Like whether you're trying to keep up with a friend or something. And I think that's the default that we go to. Like if we're trying to do something quickly, whether it's like, I don't know, get your kids ready for school or cook dinner or ride a bike, like our kind of default as humans, I think, is we try and rush that thing. And rushing doesn't necessarily make us do it any quicker or any faster. And I think I love that. I love the way you kind of use that word rushing, because that's exactly what happens, I think, to all of us as riders on bikes, is we try to go faster, and without training, without due process or practice, is our default is to go fast, we rush. And we know from just life itself that anytime we rush, it's usually a pretty average outcome.
For sure.
So I guess in a way, it's like we need to practice. Like if I want to go fast, don't rush. And how many race runs, I think you can, anyone listening, like all the racers out there, like how many race runs fell apart because you were rushing, and the rushing didn't create speed, it just created mistakes. I always think of this one race I did one year down Angry Pirate, which isn't my strongest trail anyway. I'm not very fast on that trail. And I was trying to rush the whole way down. And I think I like crashed 4 times. And it was just this vicious cycle of everything I tell my riders to not do. When you're a coach and then you race and you're like, wow, I literally just did everything I told everyone else to not do. And but we're human too, right?
We are human.
We fall into our own trap, and then you're like, wow, that was absolutely horrendous. And that was a perfect example of it. It's just trying to rush the corners, and then you brake too late, or you don't move your hips too late, or you set up a really bad line for the corners, so you lose speed anyway. Because I think rushing, the idea of rushing is, for me, rushing is trying to make a lot of decisions without much time. And that's where the lack of smoothness comes from. And it's often a mental thing. If you think of rushing, it's almost like, it's not necessarily a physical state, it's like a mental state. Like mentally, it's like you're a little bit like a squirrel on caffeine. You're just mentally like, okay, I gotta do this, I gotta do this, I gotta do this. And that translates to just being overwhelmed, like neurologically speaking. Like you're not calm in the mind. Like to make good decisions, you first need to calm the mind so that you're open to processing the information, but not just processing information, you're open to ignoring a lot of information. Like when you're in a rushing state of mind, everything you see in front of you, you tend to be aware of. Like, oh my God, look at that. Look at the dust, look at the rocks, look at the turn shape, look at the gradient. Like you're over analyzing everything. When you're in a calm state of mind, you can almost like ignore the dust and the rocks and the gradient of the trail, and you can just, you know what, I'm just going to focus on my line choice here. And I think that's where, that's, if you talk about like how, what are some strategies, what are some tactics, how do I be smoother on the bike? It's one thing to say be smooth, but how do I do it? One way of doing that is through sort of conscious practice of learning to look at the trail ahead of you and think, well, what can I process subconsciously here? What can I trust my bike to handle? What can I trust my body and my current skill set to handle autonomously? It's almost like I'm a robot and the robot has a lot of stuff pre-programmed. The robot's going to do a bunch of stuff whether I tell it to do something or not, the robot will do a bunch of stuff. And that's kind of how sometimes I think about like my body and my bike. Like if I tell it to do nothing, I will still make that turn. If I tell,
right.
I don't necessarily have to think, oh, I've got to turn. I will just turn, and if I don't actively think about where to brake, I'm still probably going to brake at the right place. Like there's all of these skills and these techniques that are autonomous in my riding, to the point where it's just like breathing. We don't think, breathe in, breathe out. We just do it. And at some point your riding becomes the same. So part of being smooth is like being in a calm state of mind, so you can allow that autonomy to happen. And then on above the surface, you can just choose that one thing, that one little thing you think might just help, whether that's, I just need to set up wider here for this turn, or going through this rock garden, I just want to be on the left a little bit, so halfway through I can just pump and then float over the second part of the rock garden. So you just get to these like little tactical decisions. But that's where I think rushing can trip us up, because it brings all of those decisions and skills up to the surface, and then it doesn't allow anything to be autonomous. And now we're trying to do way too much thinking way too quickly.
Yeah, for sure. I like that idea of slowing the mind down and asking yourself intentional questions. What do I need to be focusing on right here? There's a lot of things that we can and should ignore in those situations. I find that sometimes rushing in the trail sense is kind of comes up in the wanting to be done with something. There's this section of trail that I'm always nervous about, and I simply want to rush through it, and I want to be done with it. Whether it's a technical uphill, a technical downhill, or the biggest jump on the line, or whatever. It's something that has anxiety built up around it. And one of the things I've been thinking about with that is this idea that it's a cold night on Everest. What did you expect? The people that, if you're in this analogy, like you're climbing Mount Everest, it's cold. Like, why complain about this? What did you expect it to be? Right. Right. It's what it is. But this, like when if you're out mountain biking and you're riding the certain trail, there's some difficulty. Accept it. What's slow down, and what skills do we need to apply here, and not rush through simply wanting to be done with this with this section.
Yeah. And that kind of highlights something in my head, where it's like, how do people measure success on a bike? And too often, I think, and it's because of the influence of racing in our society, or competition in our society, is too often they measure success by how fast they do it. And if they're riding slow, they kind of, sometimes they see that as, a failure, or maybe not a failure, but like, a good way of putting it is like, if you do something fast, then you're a good rider. If you do something slow, then you're not a very good rider. And there's no sort of in between. There's not another way or another, I guess, just another way of defining what is good riding, what is successful riding, or even to your point, like what is progression. Like, but around here in Whistler, like I shouldn't say everybody, but it's pretty common here where it's like ticking boxes and progressing is based on terrain. Like if I'm a blue trail rider and suddenly I can ride black trails, then now I'm a better rider. But the reality is they're not any better at riding. They're just riding harder terrain and they're surviving a lot of the time. Or they're riding a double black. I rode my first double black. And then, you watch them ride the trail and they survived it. I mean, they rode it and they got out of it through luck, not through skill. I'm being a little bit cynical here, but sometimes you get like that as a coach. But that's a really common thing, is they're measuring success and progression in their riding through how hard the terrain is or how fast they ride. Like I would say they're the two most common kind of measurements for success. But our job as coaches is often not focused on harder terrain or faster speeds. It's let's do this same trail, this blue trail, and let's not go faster, but let's just do it smoother. And so I think that's the inherent part of coaching, is slow is smooth, and you need to be smooth if you want to go fast eventually at some point, or you need to be smooth if you want to ride harder trails eventually at some point. And I think that's where the smooth component is like that's it. That's where we want to get to with our riders, and that's where we want our coaches to be. That's what we want our coaches to be thinking about as well. Is we don't, as a coach, all the coaches listening, you all know it. If you want to make a rider better, you don't immediately make them ride harder terrain, and you don't immediately make them ride faster. You usually find easier terrain, make them ride slower, and now we build up the skills and make them ride smoother. Like we all know that as coaches. So I guess what we need to try and do, and what we are trying to do in the industry, is just trying to get that message out there to the average ridership, the average mountain biker out there. Like, you want to get better, don't just keep copying your buddies and following them up harder trails or trying to keep up with them because they're faster than you. Like, why don't you actually do the opposite? Like, go slower, stay on the easier trails, but try and do everything smoother with more style or more finesse. Thanks for listening, everyone. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify. Make sure you listen in to the end of the show, where we reveal this week's Donut of the Week. All right, let's get back to the show.
Paul, we've been speaking about this idea of slow is smooth and smooth is fast as from the concept of slowing down and really kind of tuning things back and some of the benefits to that. From putting your coach's hat on, what does actually riding faster look like in a technical sense? Like with a rider that really wants to go faster, what does that really look like?
Yeah, that's a great question, because ultimately at some point, like, sure, slow things down so you can go smooth, and then once you're consistently smoother, you'll organically start to ride faster because your skills will just be stronger. But at some point, you just want to go fast, and the best way to go fast is to try to go fast. But if you look at it from like a skills point of view, and like the last skill in our skills pyramid, and we talked about skills earlier, like fundamental skills, the one on the top of the pyramid is timing and coordination, and we kind of call it our finesse skill, because it's the skill that you apply to all the others. And timing and coordination, essentially, if you look at your classic kind of timing factors, it's things like how fast or how slow you might do something, or not necessarily how fast or slow you ride, but like how fast or slow you might execute a movement, like how fast you might move from one position to another, or how fast you might pump the bike between rollers or something. How fast or slow might that movement be? It could be how fast or slow you're riding as well, just your speed up or down the trail. And then from there, other things are like, how early or late you might do something like how early or late do you brake, or how early or late do you lean into the corner, and other things like how soft or hard, like how soft or hard do you push through the berm, and then you kind of can tie all those timing factors together. And another good phrase I like with timing and coordination is when and how much. When do you do something, and how much or how fast do you do it? So these, I guess, are all timing factors. And then you've got coordination, which is like the sequence. Like, do I brake and then lean in? Do I lean and brake at the same time? You know, and just to give you a couple of examples. So that's kind of the, you know, timing and coordination, which is something we could talk about all day, but that's it in a nutshell in like 30 seconds or whatever. But this skill of timing, it takes a long time to master. It is the refinement skill. You know, a classic case is like you might learn to do a front wheel lift, and then once you've learned how to do that front wheel lift or that rear wheel lift, or if you're more advanced, maybe a bunny hop, but you need to learn to do the movements first before you can kind of master the timing of, now can I do a bunny hop up a step and not do it too early or too late or too high or not high enough. So that's just giving you a practical example of how that timing skill is the last piece of the puzzle, so to speak. So how does this all kind of tie back to riding faster on a bike? Well, I always think of it like, if you do something a lot of the time, then you have a lot more mileage, a lot more practice, a lot more hours to get better at it. Riding fast, if that's something you only do once in a while or only in your race run, then if you think about it in terms of hours spent riding fast, it's going to be pretty low relative to just riding normally or riding at different speeds. And anything you do where you haven't spent a long time, chances are you're not going to be super consistent at it. You're not going to be super polished at it, and the chances of a mistake are going to be fairly high. So, you know, as soon as you increase your speed down the trail, all of a sudden you are going to have to brake earlier, or you're going to have to brake harder. Or if you're riding faster through some rollers, you're going to have to pump through those rollers. If indeed that's what you decide you want to do, you're going to have to pump a lot quicker and get the timing right. If you're coming in faster into a jump, you've got to kind of extend and absorb, or whatever movements you're doing on the jump, they have to happen a lot quicker. So if you're not used to riding at that speed, then timing of all those skills, the timing of all those movements, it's going to be more difficult to execute. So from a practical sense, if you want to get better at riding faster, you do need to gradually increase the speed, number one, so that the difference in the timing of those movements, or the difference in timing of when you might do something, or how early or late you might do something, it's not too much of a difference. You know, if you go from like a 7 out of a 10 to a 7.5 out of 10, sure, you're going a tiny bit quicker, but it's not so much quicker that the rider shouldn't be able to make some adjustments and still get the timing right. But if you're suddenly a rider that like you don't ever really race, and then your average speed is say a 6 out of 10, and you go to a race and you suddenly try and like, right, I'm racing, I'm going fast, and you suddenly try and race at a 9 out of 10 speed, and all of a sudden you're having to deal with the timing at such a different speed you're not used to. And that's why, technically speaking, riders will make mistakes if they just suddenly try to ride fast without any kind of due process or progression up to it. Like, in your mind, like as a coach, like how does that make sense? Like, how does that sit with you as a rider, as a coach, that kind of idea of looking at it just purely from a skills point of view and that timing and coordination skill?
Yeah, I mean, from the coach's point of view, this really encourages me to get rid of thinking about fast being speed as simply a measurement of time, and really understanding all of these fundamental skills and at what speed or what rate, what duration do we need to be focusing in on.
Yeah.
So going faster is not necessarily just simply pedaling harder or not braking or whatever, but using your trail scanning faster.
Yeah.
For instance, to create, better field of vision for what you're seeing. I think
that's a cool example, because like, I don't know about you, but I really relate to that. Like, as soon as I try to go faster, I notice probably one of the first skills that changes or has to change is my trail scanning.
For sure.
I have to be scanning more or looking further ahead. And if I don't, everything just becomes so reactionary. Like, I think that's probably the first skill I need to train my brain when I suddenly increase my speed, is like, right, let's just adjust my scanning.
Right. Things start to fall apart. Like if you can't speed up your awareness, and collect really rich data very quickly, then the rest of it just, you're just fumbling around the trail.
Well, that too, like, it's not just like where I'm looking or how far I'm looking down the trail, how much I'm scanning between what's happening now, what's happening next. It's also like, the faster I ride, the more I have to kind of ignore things, because I don't have the time. Even if I am looking further ahead, I still don't have as much time, generally speaking. I'm not. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think that's certainly talking about downhill racing, the track walk, the memorization of everything that's on the trail, the visualization of those things, before the runs, so that you can simply focus in on your performance, the action, right? How much of this is we're going to disregard.
Yeah, I like that, because that's partly the job of the whole track walk, is to like try and memorize as much of the terrain, try and get as much of the decision making done before you ride. So when you are riding and you are going really fast, you have fewer decisions to make, basically, because you kind of done them all previously.
Right.
Yeah, that's why that track walk is so important. Like, because you often hear like from racers where, especially these days, they're like, oh, it's so competitive and you can't win a race at 80% or 90% anymore. You have to be going 100% to win a World Cup. So like, how do we reconcile that with what we've talked about for the average rider? Like, if you're riding 80 or 90%, you're probably going to be faster. Like, how do we reconcile that with pros having to go 100% to win a race versus the kind of typical amateur rider or amateur racer that if they try and ride 100%, they're more likely to crash? Or should they be trying to ride 100%? Like, when might it be safe for them to do so, or how could they do that? Like, I don't know. What's your thoughts?
I think it has to come back to being incremental with it. We can't ask me to go to a World Cup track and try to ride it 100%. If I'm not working through all of the steps and gradually increasing speed with this. And I think working with our coaches, it's the same thing. We've got to look at increments.
Yeah, I sometimes break the track down to like probability of, or kind of risk and probability of mistakes. So if there's a section that's fairly easy for my skill level and confidence and just how I'm feeling that day, I know I can attack it and I can be like, this section for me, for Paul, I am going to try and go 100% my speed, like, because I trust that I can do that, feel good, not make mistakes, stay online. And then there might be another section, like maybe there's like a gnarly rock garden or something. And I'll be like, you know what? I'm not going to race this section because I don't quite trust, like if I carry in extra speed, I don't quite trust that I'm going to do it clean. There's also quite a high consequence. It's rock garden. If I crash here, it's really going to hurt. Like maybe that high speed fast section, it was, and I was going 100%. Like maybe that section is not as high consequence too. Like I feel safer to try going fast in that section because there aren't like giant tree stumps or something next to the trail that I might hit, for example. So I know I try and break it down. Like some sections I might go 100% my speed, and other sections are like, you know what, let's just ride through here cleanly and smoothly. So I might be like 80%, maybe even like 60 or 70% my speed.
And then as soon as I get through that, maybe that crux section, then boom, okay, right, let's get back up to my 90% speed. Or so it's not so much like the whole race run. Am I trying to go 100%? It might just be sections. And then, well, I think World Cup riders, they do the same. I think overall their effort was like, I tried to go 100% speed, like as fast as I could. But there were probably sections within that race run where they had to back off because, I don't know, it was massive holes or it's just too slippery or something. But yeah, yes, it's such a cool idea because like, and it's so hard because you just have to be patient with it. And I always think of my buddy, like I mentioned earlier, John Shirley, like he's always saying patience. Like when you go really fast, you have to be patient with your movements because people sometimes will like, they'll go really fast in terms of how fast they're traveling from A to B. And then on the bike, they'll start doing too much. So we have this saying in high level coaching, like the faster you go, the slower you move to a degree. Because if you're going really fast and you suddenly make a big movement, that's unless the terrain demands it, then that's going to be sketchy. And if you look at like Aaron Gwynn's a good example, like you know, when you see a racer and they're going super fast, but they just look so steady and calm, like Loic Bruni is a master of that. Like he almost looks like he's not moving at all. And it's partly because he's going crazy fast, right? So that's where I sometimes reconcile like smooth is fast. It's like slower, smoother movements actually can help the bike go fast from A to B within reason. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like within reason, because obviously if you're going really fast, you know, you're going to have to pump that jump quicker, or you're going to have to like suck up that rock rollover quicker or something like that. But at the same time, some of your movements need to slow down and to be smoother the faster you go. Have you felt that on your bike where you're like, maybe you're doing a race or something, or you're following a buddy and you're like, you notice like the faster you go, it's almost like the smoother or slower your movements become?
Yeah, totally. You know, you can feel like basically your center of mass like really slowing down. You know, and the bike and your limbs are you know, kind of just stabilizing or neutralizing what's happening, and there's a fluidity to the movements. And I think that's what keeps us coming back to, you know, going fast on a bike, is that those kind of feelings and that application of all these things together, creating that kind of that sensation.
I think that's, for me, it's that kind of rare Zen moment where you're going really fast, but you're like really calm mentally, and your movements are really smooth and purposeful and quite slow, even though you're going, you know, you're hauling ass up the climb. No, not up the climb. Not me, definitely not me. Down the trail at least.
Right on. I think that the measurement, right? The measurement of performance in the saying here is smooth or fast. You know, I think this idea of focusing on smooth, how smooth is kind of like the grease in the wheel here. You know, looking at how that works. Any other thoughts on this saying that you want to add?
Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. I think one thing I mean, I love World Cup racing, you know, whether it's cross country or downhill, just seeing the best riders in the world do what they do on a bike. Because in a way, that's kind of as coaches and as riders, as athletes, that's our technical reference model. You know, pick the best people in the world that race cross country mountain biking or EWS or whatever your sort of preferred flavor is, and study them. Don't just watch a couple of races, like study them, watch the whole season and listen to the interviews, because there's so much to learn. Listen to podcasts because there's so much to learn. Like I always remember this interview with Greg Minnaar years ago, and someone was asking him, like, how are you so consistent? How do you win so many races or get so many podiums? And you know, you must be really, really fast. It was along those lines. And long story short, Greg was like, well, I don't race at 100% at every race, because if I do, I'm going to crash. And then I'm not going to get 6 podiums that season. I might get 1 or 2. So it's all about in the off season, and this is what we do as coaches. It's all about building that skill set to a point where you can win a World Cup at your 90%, at your 85%, maybe even win a World Cup at your 80%, because you're that fast. Your skills are that strong. You've done your skill homework, you've done your physical conditioning, strength and conditioning, you've done your mental training. Every component of your performance is so strong that at race day, you don't actually need to go 100%. So when you think of it in that context, Greg Minnaar, one of the best racers of all time, you think of Rachel Atherton, she's in a league of her own, because she could win races, a lot of races. And even though she's pushing herself and she's trying crazy hard, I bet you that she has more bandwidth to play with in terms of how close she needs to be at 100% to win a race. I bet she's probably got more wiggle room than some other athletes. And that's where you see, the rider that they win 1 World Cup, or they win 2 World Cups. They never win any more World Cups, because probably on that day, something magical happened for sure. There's always when the stars align and boom, they just have this amazing performance. That happens in all sports with all athletes. But it took all of those stars to align for that rider to achieve 100% performance. In other words, that rider can never win a World Cup at 80% or 90% performance. So even in the context of the top riders like Rachel and top riders in the industry, the same concept applies. Is ultimately they're trying to get to a point where there is a degree of slow is smooth and smooth is fast in their race runs. There's always that other saying of like, well, screw that, fast is fast, slow is slow. Right? Which honestly, I also kind of agree with, because it does get to the point, like all of these things, there's always a balance. It's like, well, slow is slow and fast is fast. But is that repeatable?
Right.
And that's what makes a good rider, is whether you're racing or not. If you want to increase your average speed through the season and not keep crashing, you've got some friends that are faster than you and you want to keep up with them. You might be able to keep up with them on that one trail on that one day. But how do you keep up with them on every ride? Well, you've got to get to a point where there's a certain, your skill set is such that keeping up with them now isn't your 100%. Keeping up with them is now your 80%. So in that context, anytime you're riding 70, 80%, there's going to be some kind of slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Because for the average rider, fast usually means fast some of the time and slow a lot of the time, because fast is scary. I'm not used to riding fast. That's the biggest mistake I make early season. If I start racing again, like this year, we haven't really raced for a couple of years because of COVID. So the Fat Wednesdays haven't been on. And then the first couple of races this year, I sucked because I was trying to go fast. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier. And then I was just rushing and I was making mistakes. And it took me a couple of races to remind myself, like, no, if for me, especially my bad habit, as soon as I try to actually go fast, I suck. Way better for me to just build speed gradually, focus on being smooth, and trust. I think trust is a huge word when it comes to riding fast. Is I need to trust that what I'm currently doing on my bike is fast. Because as soon as I don't trust that my braking point or my leaning my bike or pumping or whatever it is I'm doing on my bike, as soon as I don't trust that that's quite fast, I'll start rushing. And the good races, I think, are the ones that are like, they trust that what they're doing is fast, and that allows them to relax to a certain degree, a certain point.
Well, fantastic. I think that is an excellent place to end this discussion.
Cool.
Trust. I love it.
Trust yourself, and don't wreck yourself.
Indeed.
Something like that.
Hey, before we sign off here, Paul, are you working on anything in your writing, your own personal writing?
Yeah, always. And that's partly my issue. I need to turn my head off. But fitness a little bit right now. It's the end of the season, but I'm kind of getting ready for Australian season, and so I've had a bit of a dip, and now I'm just getting back on the trainer. So a little bit of fitness, but for me, something I've been really working on lately is just trying to feel. It's kind of funny that based on this podcast as well today, like the topic for today, is trying to feel mentally calm, no matter how gnarly the terrain is or how fast I'm going. Because the two big things that bring on anxiety are fast speed and or gnarly terrain. Like for most riders, they're probably the two big things. So I've really been working on more of the mental side of things, bit of mental training, because I've been riding long enough. I think I have definite skill and technique deficiencies that I could work on for sure. Like, for example, I'm collapsing in the corners too much. So that was our focus at the end of the season, is definitely collapsing my legs less through the corners, especially high speed berms. But more mentally, I'm just working on whatever rocky shoot or rock roll or fast loose section or trail is trying to stay as mentally calm as I would be as if I was just riding down a green flow trail. And that sounds kind of simple, but man, it's hard to do. And it's partly like anything, it's like unless you have purposeful practice to it, it won't get better. Like practice, I love the saying, practice makes permanent.
Yeah.
And if you're constantly reacting mentally, like, oh, there's a rock, there's a drop, there's a rock roll, and you kind of tense up, you get anxious about it. If you react like that every time, and then you do that every ride, you're just creating something permanent. And the only way to get that quote unquote perfection is to have purposeful practice, which means changing something. And just like we do with skills, like, I was talking about collapsing in the corners. Like the only way I'm going to get better at that is dropping my heels and practicing keeping a more stacked leg through certain berms. You have to change what you're doing, otherwise you won't get better. So mentally that's hard because you don't necessarily have something physical to like, well, I need to bend my knees less or I need to get lower. Like sometimes those physical things can be easier to change because you can feel it, you can actively do it. But changing your mental reaction to something, your natural reaction to fear or danger, that's hard. So that's something I'm trying to work on right now.
Excellent.
What are you working on?
Similarly, some of those mental components. One thing that I've been practicing, I like that practice makes permanent. Breathing.
Yeah, nice.
Breathing through difficult terrain. So I caught myself like kind of holding my breath, kind of like getting kind of hyper inward on a rock roll or whatever. So I've been consciously riding a little bit slower through some technical terrain and really focusing on like really smooth breathing.
Yeah,
and it's really like calmed my mind down. It's like, this isn't that bad. this is I'm in it, right? I'm in it and enjoying it.
I love that. And that's kind of like a how, right? Like how, for me, like how do I try and mentally stay calm when there's risk or danger or perceived risk or danger? And it's maybe a how for me could be that breathing. And because sometimes you need something physical to keep the mental space where you want. Yeah, it's funny. The other thing I was just thinking about as you were talking is like, I try and relax my face. Like almost let my jaw just drop. But I'm really aware, like,
you're right though. Yeah.
My face is relaxed. Like kind of like you're getting a massage. When you get a massage and your face just goes floppy. I feel like when I ride, if I can kind of keep a certain sort of no tension in my head or my eyes. I can just keep my face relaxed. It almost just helps me mentally stay in that, like, oh, I'm riding down the valley trail, I'm riding through a car park kind of feeling. I'm not about to hit this gnarly rock roll. But yeah.
Totally. And that translates directly to the way that your mind then behaves, through breathing or the relaxation, your facial muscles, what you're doing with your eye. Can you relax your eyes and, even smile?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I totally do that. Sometimes I smile like, oh, this is awesome. I love this. When secretly I'm, making brown pants, but yeah, I kind of trick myself into it. Right.
Right on. Well, hey, Paul, this has been awesome.
Yeah, bud, that was great. Let's do more. Hey, before we go, it's first episode, so we kind of forgot what we're doing. But we are going to have a featured donut on every episode. Why? Because we called the podcast the Mountain Bike Coaching Podcast, Donuts and Bikes. So we have to include donuts. And the other reason why, to our wonderful listeners, is, obviously, donuts are amazing. And if you mountain bike, you should eat donuts because donuts are healthy for you. And the science behind that, in case you haven't heard this, is that it's scientifically proven that happier people are healthier, better immune systems, better quality of life. So my logic is donuts make you happy, and therefore they are healthy. What do you think about that, Christian?
I totally agree, 100%. There's data there behind the happiness.
It's data. It is proven science.
University, level stuff for sure.
Yeah, my kids agree with me, so it must be true. So anyway, without further ado, the donut of the week is a local favorite of mine. I highly recommend pairing it with a cold glass of milk. There's a pina colada donut in the local supermarket. And actually, they have a staff shortage right now, so the donuts aren't for sale right now. But it is awesome. And it's everything you think a pina colada should be, which is awesome, like creamy coconut pineapple goodness, but in donut form. Technically it's big enough to just cut it in half and have 2 donuts, but on those days where you just need a bit of extra happiness in your life, you just have to go all in and commit and eat the whole thing. And the good news is, when you do those days and you eat the whole donut, it's just more of an excuse to go ride your bike. So that's perfect. So wherever you are in town, try and find a pina colada donut. That's the donut of the week. And if you find that donut wherever you are in the world and you eat that donut this week, it will make you ride your bike faster. So that's what we're going to wrap up with.
Oh, I can't wait to find one, Paul.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show and that it sparks some ideas for your riding or your coaching. As always, our approach to coaching and mountain biking is pros and cons, not right and wrong. With that in mind, our podcast is meant to be more of a conversation about certain topics or techniques rather than the final say in how to ride or how to teach. As always, please take care if you're using or applying any of the information or techniques discussed in this podcast. Stay safe, ride smart, and we'll see you next time.